When examining the Holocaust, the label evil is often used to describe Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. But psychiatrist Aaron T. Beck argues that this label offers zero explanatory power. It functions as a way to stop the investigation before the actual mechanics of behavior are understood. Standard historical models analyze World War II through materialist causes, like resource scarcity, or ideological drivers, such as the spread of fascism. These models frequently ignore the internal emotional world of the individual. Clinical pathology and collective emotion are rarely evaluated as concrete causes for state-sponsored violence. Replacing theological descriptions with empirical mechanics allows for an examination of how mass violence functions as a measurable process. By integrating these siloed disciplines, we can map exactly how internal cognitive states scale outward to influence an entire nation. This framework uses a series of expanding scales, beginning with individual neurobiology and early development. The process moves from that center through clinical pathology and interpersonal interaction, eventually reaching macro-sociological mobilization. Atrocities are built from the ground up, scaling from a single disturbed mind to a functioning state apparatus. At the micro level, Hitler's development was defined by an abusive, alcoholic father. He described a childhood of physical violence and constant fear, fitting the parameters of an authoritarian parenting style. Hans Eisenach's personality theory links this environment to high psychoticism, a state of low cortical arousal that leads to impulsivity and antisocial traits. To evaluate this using modern standards, researchers employ an informant rating methodology, where experts on a historical figure complete assessments based on DSM-4 criteria. The data shows that Hitler met the threshold for several severe psychological conditions, specifically PTSD and schizophrenia, paranoid type. Paranoid schizophrenia does not imply a lack of intelligence or cognitive function. It is characterized by highly coherent persecutory or grandiose delusions that can allow an individual to function effectively in occupational settings. In 1918, while hospitalized at Passwalk following a mustard gas attack, Hitler learned of Germany's military surrender. He claimed to experience a hallucination, a vision from God directing him to enter politics and save Germany from an imagined Jewish threat. This clinical pathology provided the raw material for a delusion, but a single man's hallucination cannot initiate a global war on its own. Moving into sociology explains how a personal delusion can spread to an entire population. This cycle illustrates the looking glass self, a social cognitive process where shame is the internalization of how we imagine others perceive and judge us. W.E.B. Du Bois demonstrated that this shame can be systemic, where a marginalized group internalizes a sense of inferiority based on the gaze of a dominating society. This socialized shame connects the individual pathology to the broader group. Shame is a volatile mechanism. When it is unacknowledged, it can be transferred outward, converting personal inadequacy into collective aggression. In 1919, Germany existed in an emotional climate of national shame. Defeated soldiers returned to a population reeling from the loss of the war. This was driven by the Treaty of Versailles, which stripped Germany of its territory and international standing. Cultural shifts and the rise of modern art further alienated the population. Hitler personally blamed these shifts for his own failures as an artist in Vienna. Events like the surrender and the treaty act as moral shocks, disruptions strong enough to trigger a sudden inclination for political action. Hitler transferred his own personal shame onto the public, aligning his pathology with the nation's existing emotional climate. To turn a moral shock into violence, a leader must attach the blame to a human target. Hitler achieved this by scapegoating an imagined international conspiracy for the surrender of 1918. By weaponizing this climate, a political actor can convert a nation's collective shame into targeted rage. This conversion relies on redemptive anti-Semitism, the promise that eliminating the scapegoat will purge the shame and restore national pride. This process scales from individual pathology through a moral shock, eventually resulting in organized state violence. The Nazi leadership sought to transform these raw emotions into a substantive, race-based legal order. This was codified in 1935 through the Nuremberg laws. To find a working model for this order, they looked abroad. Ministry of Justice records show they studied the United States quota systems, anti-miscegenation statutes, and the one-drop rule to translate raw sentiment into biological law. The resulting laws defined German and Jewish strictly by blood quanta, replacing personal identity with mandated biological categories. This codification rigidified the scapegoat category, turning emotional prejudice into a bureaucratic framework for extermination. The Holocaust emerged from a measurable intersection of psychology and sociology. Individual psychopathology met a calculated mobilization of collective shame, producing a functional state policy of murder. These interlocking mechanics show that atrocities are never spontaneous. They are the result of specific factors coming together in a specific environment. Mapping this process allows for the recognition of similar patterns in contemporary movements that attempt to weaponize national emotional climates.